Okay, so I think we should be, I think we are recording. Yep, I'm seeing my transcription right now. Okay, well, Adam,
Okay.
if you want to take it away.
Yeah, sounds good. Unfortunately, we're missing Patrick, but thanks everyone else for joining. The agenda was posted, if everyone can reference that. There's one item that we failed to put on there, which is reviewing the meeting minutes from the November meeting. So why don't we start with that, and then we can proceed forward with the agenda for tonight. So I see that the November minutes are posted on the website. So people can reference them there. We started last time by reviewing the October meeting. Oh, I am looking at very old notes.
They should be in the Teams channel that we always just put.
Channel. Okay. For some reason, the November 2020 notes are posted under November 2021. All right, so let's go to the Teams channel. I'm using two different computers here against the challenge. So it's under Files, and it is Community Council FY22 November.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Rick. All right. It's funny how much similarity there is between the November 2020 and 2021 meetings. So we started the meeting with reviewing the previous meeting minutes. We did we gave an update on the Title I walkthrough and talked about kind of the impact and focus there. We discussed the dress code policy, and the key takeaway was soliciting feedback from parents in the community. We reviewed the technology safety plan and discussed possible next steps there, and then we wrapped up the meeting. I don't know if we need to go through any of that in detail, or are there any concerns from anyone on the call? Okay, then I would motion to approve last week's meetings, or meeting minutes, last month's meeting minutes.
I second that motion.
Great, thanks, Rick. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into tonight's agenda. Oh, it's a Word doc. That's okay. All right, so the first thing that we wanted to talk about was feedback regarding the dress code policy. Rick, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to connect with you, but did you have a chance to connect with any parents in the community on this topic?
I actually did not have a lot of, I did not do a great job connecting with parents on this one. I was thinking, I don't know how successful this is at King. My previous experience is like, but would maybe send a survey out to parents like at large would be maybe a good idea too.
Yeah, we could do something like that. So I was able to connect with 3 different parents, and so let me kind of summarize some of the feedback that I received. I expressed the idea that we want to try and make our school as inclusive as possible while still having reasonable standards as far as the dress policy. And every single person that I talked to fully agreed with that. There was a lot of consensus around the idea of, ensuring that people aren't being unnecessarily excluded, where there's not a real need for it. So what I had done is I broke out the existing policy into bullet points, and then kind of went bullet point by bullet point with the people that I reviewed it with. There was a lot of consensus around, some of the clauses as far as it's not okay to have things that are like offensive. So specifically, the language is offensive, obscene, vulgar, or lewd, right? Clothing which displays or advertises legal or illegal drugs or sexually explicit words, messages, or pictures are not allowed. Nobody had any qualms with that and didn't want to remove that as expected, right? So the areas of real discussion were around shoes, hair color, hats, things of that nature, where there's a little bit more, it's not so cut and dry. All the parents that I spoke to were very much in agreement that the current shoe policy makes sense, right? We want kids to come to school in shoes that work for, play and for the activities that they do. So flip-flops, platforms, and Heelys, anything that's not compatible with physical activity or anything that potentially presents a danger, everyone was very much in line with. And so there were basically 4 key points of feedback that I would kind of distill together that all the parents were very closely in line with. None of them felt that hair color was something that was distracting enough to prohibit in the policy. And the existing policy doesn't really state that hair needs to be a natural color. The language as it currently exists states that their hair does not disrupt the learning environment, right? But it doesn't explicitly say no color currently. But that was a pretty common point of consensus, was that they weren't concerned about hair color. And so maybe we could just remove that from the policy altogether.
I was just going to jump in super quick and say that I had a chance to look at Central Davis's dress code policy, and I'm pretty sure that they do not have any type of policy that addresses hair color as well.
Okay, so, that's good. So that creates
so I feel like that's a commonality or whatever with the junior high's dress code policy, that's something that would go along with theirs.
Cool. That's good to have consistency there. So that was one key point of feedback that we may consider changing. The second was around, hats and bandanas and things like that in the school. And there was also consensus here, which I found interesting because I did not, lead with this idea, but almost all of the parents said something to the effect of, we think kids should be able to wear hats in the school, especially at recess and in the hallways, but they would leave it up to the discretion of teachers to make the decision on whether, it's appropriate for in the classroom. There was a few parents who said, whether it's allowed in the classroom or not should probably be a school-wide thing. So it's not one teacher, being the uncool teacher, so to speak. But I think as parents, we defer that to teachers. If they feel like it would be a distraction to have hats in their classroom, we could continue to not allow it there. But generally, like halls and recess, people are pretty okay with. Any thoughts or feedback on that one?
I was just going to say, in response to our conversation that we had last time, we said that most teachers, the classroom is where they have been allowing kids to wear hats and things like that. It's just been problematic. And we talked about how kids are allowed to wear hats outside at recess, and that really the hallways and the lunchroom or those other types of areas were the most problematic, because we had really an inconsistent policy. So I think if I'm hearing your feedback, is that parents don't have a problem with it. And so instead of trying to communicate to our kids that in some parts of the school that it's okay to wear a hat, in some parts of school it's not okay to wear a hat, that maybe we could just move forward with saying, that hats are okay to wear. And if we need to classify what is a hat, we can say hats or beanies, be specific that way. A bandana, I don't know that we're going to have a kid claim that a bandana is a form of a hat. And I know that typically bandanas are banned on dress code policies because of their association with gangs. But I did look up Central Davis's again, and they do have a ban against hats. at their school, unless it's permitted for religious or medical reasons. The only difference though that I see is that they don't have recess and we do. And that's I think that's a big thing too for the hat wearing. And so even though if we were to go and say, hey, hats are fine, even though it doesn't match the junior high's policy, I still think that it's okay given the unique circumstances of elementary school settings.
Yeah, I think what we could do is, instead of saying what's not allowed, we could just make it explicit what is allowed. So we could say beanies or standard baseball hat style
Right.
hats. That's a little circular, but are permissible, and just leave it at that.
Okay.
So that was the second point of feedback.
Are we saying they're permissible in the classroom then? Or are we just saying, because I know, okay, teaching younger grades, if it's not on their head when they go to lunch, it's going to get lost before they go outside. I mean, maybe it's a JSSC thing that if it's a school-wide thing and parents want to leave it up to the teachers, then they're the ones who clarify that. I don't know.
We can put something in there that says that within the classroom, it's at the teacher's discretion, but that outside of the classroom is fine. Instead of the other way around or whatever, right? If that makes sense.
That way, that verbiage.
That way, the teacher still has some say in what occurs in the classroom, but really, they don't really need to be worrying about policing it in the halls or in the lunchroom or outside or etc.
Yeah, so we say like beanies and standard baseball caps are permissible in the school.
Mm-hmm.
Classrooms are up to the teacher's discretion.
They go out to PE a lot of times when it's hot. They wear a hat. I mean, it's just what we do.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, there, let's see. I scrolled in my notes, so I lost where I was. Let me find it here.
Adam, I was going to ask on your feedback. There was mentioned a lot of talk last time about excessive makeup wear. I don't know if that's gotten better or worse as time has gone on, but I don't know if you had any feedback on that either.
I did ask about it, and the feedback was basically makeup needs to be basically what we talked about last time, like reasonable. If it's, I hate to use the word ridiculous or excessive, you know, so maybe, but that language is already in there. So maybe we just don't touch that. Like we could just leave shoes, clothing, and makeup in a way that does not disrupt the learning environment. But there wasn't a lot of consensus on like removing that language.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think that sounds fine. I would say that the makeup is not normally it's not normally a huge problem, you know, but I do think that you have to have some sort of broad language a little bit in the policy that and allow people to make some subjective decisions, you know, on what's disruptive and what's not.
Yep. Okay, and then the third section that came up from multiple parents was there's actually nothing in the dress code policy currently around like being covered up, which actually kind of surprised me. And so this was a suggestion by multiple parents to put in some language of like undergarments need to be covered, or like mid sections need to be covered, something like that. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, like Dan and Leslie, if this is apologies, Mr. Hanson, Bertram, so used to his first names. But yeah, like
we're all friends here.
Yeah, is that a problem that you see within the school, especially like summertime? You know, inappropriate clothes where teachers are needing to instruct children to cover up more, things like that?
I would say, no, in my opinion, no. I did, going again back to the Central Davises, they do have a lot of bullet points that are related to how much clothing kids are wearing. And they have pretty specific, like, I'm just going to read off of theirs. All students have to have a minimum of 3 finger widths of material on their shoulder. The entire torso must be covered at all times, and the torso is defined as the trunk of the human body or the part that does not include the head, arms, or legs. Sorry.
Seems excessive for elementary.
Right. And they talk about material should not gape at the armhole. So they're pretty specific. I don't think that we need to have language like that, in my opinion, but I think that we could come up with a general statement that just says, that your body, I don't know, something we either can focus on a statement regarding the torso. I don't feel like having undergarments show by our kids is a problem at our school.
It is nice if a girl shows up with her pants shredded, like really up high. I've just been at other schools where a 6th grade girl would show up and she's made holes in her pants all the way up, that you're like, okay, that's really pushing it. That there's just some kind of parameter that says that the clothing shouldn't be distracting or revealing. Maybe revealing, I don't know. Kelly, you're a girl. What do you think? I mean, and we don't want spaghetti straps. We don't want spaghetti straps on kids.
Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate. And take, I don't know. Wife beaters, not a great idea for kids to have at school. I don't know, most schools don't allow tank tops. Kelly, have you been at a school? Well, you're new to Utah, but.
Yeah, and I'll say coming from secondary, there's a lot of the pushing of the midriffs and the holes in the jeans and the really short shorts. So I don't know if there's some sort of language that could encompass a lot of those things, but.
Yeah, if we could make it really general, but it basically says, you got to have more than a tank top on, and you got to cover up.
I think that's where some of the language came in as far as like undergarments, because that would cover like bra straps and things if people are wearing tank tops.
Well, and if we said,
without requiring like cap sleeves or something like that,
Right, and if we if they were wearing boxer shorts, even if they were a girl, I mean, a boy, of course, boxer shorts, you would want those to be covered. And so if you're a girl, boxer short area, I don't know how we say that though, without doing a bunch of bullet points. Kelly, what do you think?
Sorry, I keep muting and then unmuting.
I know. Yeah.
I'm not sure of the language. I don't know the language piece, but I know if there's not something, like, it will get pushed, the line will keep getting pushed. So
when a girl shows up with that on and we have nothing to refer, it's just nice to have something to the parents that we say, oh, our policy is that, it's something that like boxer shorts would cover, and not tank tops. Or less.
I'm happy to come up with a statement.
I think we don't need to come up with it right now, but I think going in that direction, how do you feel, parents?
I think it's good to have consistency on the rules. Like, it's good to know what is acceptable and what's not, so like what to buy and what to dress in that respect. And I think a general statement would be fine, to be honest with you.
Okay, and the one thing I was going to say too is the one thing that I liked about Central Davis's dress code policy is that they had a rationale that they had at the very beginning of it. I think that even though it is quite lengthy, I did like the rationale at the beginning. It kind of sets the precedence for this is why we have this in place. So I feel like maybe adding that as well, to try to help alleviate any feelings, that parents may, feel like if we're trying to exclude or ostracize, and let them know up front that's not our intent.
Yeah. Or let them express themselves appropriately.
Right.
Yeah, so one other thing that just comes up, and this was my last point of feedback, and I hadn't actually looked at the Central Davis, so I'm glad you pointed that out, but they have a blurb, and then their dress code policy is bullet points, where ours is just kind of like a paragraph that you have to read through. So that was the other suggestion for multiple parents is, can we reformat it to bullet points so it's a little bit easier to reference, which I think is a great suggestion. So maybe that's how we format it. We maybe even just copy paste that blurb because it's probably really good. We could look at that. And then we could bullet point out the key considerations. So we could leave in language around some of these things that are just obvious, like, no illegal drug stuff on your clothes. And then just tailor the rest of the bullet points to what we've discussed tonight.
It sounds like a good plan.
Would you like us to take a shot at creating a draft of an update?
If I would probably encourage anybody who would like to can go ahead and do that, and then I think we can, combine them, and we can have multiple people do that, and then we can look at them and take care of that. But I would probably encourage us to potentially do that outside of the community council meeting, and move on from the topic, but then have people participate that would like to participate in it.
Can I ask one more question on this topic? Sorry. We also mentioned like having this be more of a living document where we'd update it maybe yearly. Do you want to specify that? Like this is updated every December or something?
I think we should. I think I would love to include language about that in the actual policy. Central Davis's has a year. It says this dress code will take effect on this date, but I think I would like to have a concluding sentences or paragraph at the end of the policy that says this policy will be updated annually, and if you have concerns or feedback, to reach out to your community council representative, to provide feedback or whatever, something like that.
Okay, so next steps, we can come up with a proposed draft, maybe communicate to identify people who want to maybe join in a separate call just to talk through it and agree. And then we could even communicate it in like one of the newsletters if you think that's appropriate. To say we've got an updated dress code, please reference and let us know if you have any feedback.
I think that would be great to put it in the Lion Pride. Yep.
Okay, so that's great. So really good feedback from the community there. Looking at the clock, we're already at 6:30, and so we're quite a ways in. We have Ms. Strader here tonight to go through the math goal data. So why don't we skip in our agenda to that topic to allow whatever time you need to cover that, and then we can, with the remainder of the time, touch on whatever other agenda points we can get through.
Okay, is that good with everyone? Yeah. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
It has not come through yet.
What?
Not yet.
Not
And
yet.
Keep looking.
It's really beautiful, so we really do want to see it.
Never mind. We really did oh, you know what? We really did practice too.
You've done your due diligence for sure.
All right, let's see.
There it is.
There it is. Okay. All right. So just a little bit of data. And I had to put this in here. Adam told me not to do any graphics, but I wanted you to be excited for data. So there's a little Buddy the elf. But just there's two math measures that we've done with some grade levels and then all grade levels. Is the Acadians math screener, I guess they're calling it this year. And then so it's new to the state of Utah. And then the TSSP data that our school kind of put together last year started. Okay, so Acadians is new this year. It's state mandated, but it's more of a screener, and they are very adamant that we call it a screener versus like a summative assessment, so that we use the data to just identify math difficulties and offer support versus kind of using it as an evaluative tool. But it is just like our TSSP assessment. It's given in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So we won't do the middle of the year until after Christmas break. And then they have Acadians math benchmarks for K through 6, but in the state of Utah, or at least in Davis, we're just doing K through 3 this year. So that's all the data that we have for that measure. So for kindergarten, every single student is individually tested on these 3 different measures. So just some basic number identification, some discrimination, which one is greater, and knowing which number comes next after any set of number. And then first grade also has 4 different tests that are individually given to the students. And then it has a whole class component of computation. So that's just like, they even call it a worksheet in the test, but it's just a list of basic addition and subtraction problems that it's a timed test as well. But then for 2nd and 3rd grade and even all the way to 6th, they're just given a computation test and a concepts and applications test. And those are all whole group. There's no individualized testing in 2nd grade and beyond. Okay, so here comes some data and some graphs. So for our kindergartners, the math composite score for each grade, it's based off of a different formula. Each of these measures are weighted a little bit differently. But basically, it's the complete snapshot of each student, and then these other tests are the individual tests for kindergarten. So we can say, I don't know if you want to read all the numbers, but that's our kindergarten data.
Just a question about the colors here. What does the blue, green, yellow, and red represent?
Yep. So blue is well above benchmark. Green is at benchmark. Yellow is below benchmark, and then red is well below benchmark. And they have, and I guess for Acadians, throughout the year, the problem difficulty does not change. The benchmark scores will change, hoping that students are growing throughout the year, but the level of the test does not change throughout the year, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to elaborate on those? So I'm assuming that the composite score is made up of the number identification fluency, beginning quantity discrimination, and the next number fluency, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And like I said, so each, there's like a big long document that has different formulas for each of the grade levels, and each one is weighted a little differently. So I don't know. So in kindergarten, I think they're all weighted the same, but as we get to the older grades with the computation and the concepts and applications, the concepts and applications is weighted a little bit more than just the computation.
Typically on these types of tests, we don't look at the composite score. We look at the subtests instead. It's just kind of an indicator, and the others help us have more specialized information.
Right, and I just was gonna, so I'm Rick and Adam, with number identification, I think you guys probably understand what that means. But as far as I just was glancing at the data super quick, And out of the 3 areas, it looks like next number fluency is the area where we have the most or the largest amount of room to grow. And so do you want to elaborate, Kelly, on really quickly what next number fluency is?
Yeah, so next number fluency is an all verbal test. Like there's nothing the student actually looks at. So who the proctor is just saying a number and the student has to say the number that follows that number. So, and they don't get any visual at all. So, and I can see, I don't know, especially as kindergartners in August, they were given this test that they can't visually see any numbers. So.
And sorry, just to clarify, this average, is this the average across the students tested, or is this the based on those benchmarks you mentioned earlier? I'm sorry.
The average here?
This is the average across the group, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Right. I mean, you can. I know we have several grade levels worth of data to go over, but if as we're just looking, if you want to hurry and point out really quickly, you know, what we're talking about as far as the data goes, in some of the categories, that might be helpful.
You mean, what does the test measure?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay. So do you want me to go? So obviously number identification fluency is just the kids are given a list of numbers, and this one is actually timed and they get only a minute, and they have to go through, they have to point to the number and say and identify as many numbers as they can in a minute. Beginning quantity discrimination. So, and you'll notice in first grade, there's advanced quantity discrimination. For kindergarten, beginning is just 2 pictures, or well, it's a rectangle with on one side and the other side of dots. So it's they call it supertizing, but being able to know how many dots there are at first glance instead of counting one-to-one correspondence. But this is also a time test at 1 minute, and they have to say which side of the rectangle has the greater amount of dots. And so for this one, the student has to actually point to the one with the greater amount of dots and say the number of dots that is greater. So if they're given 6 and 5, they have to say the number 6 is greater in order to get counted for getting that correct. If they just say that one's greater and they don't say the actual number, then they do not get the point. So some teachers were upset with, you know, knowing that some students know the difference. So they kind of had to train their kids on how to take the test or what they're actually looking for. And then obviously in next number fluency is just an all verbal test. Any other questions? Not one? Ready for first? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll have some questions a little later, but yeah, it'd be good to see some of the data first.
Okay. So in first grade, they actually, so the beginning of the year, they have the most amount of measures that are tested. And then in middle of the year, the number identification goes away and the next number of fluency goes away. So they will still give a composite score that is based off of a benchmark number. But number identification fluency is that same test that is in kindergarten where they're identifying numbers. But these red students right here were the first students that we looked at in first grade and said, okay, if they're red in number identification fluency, we really have to get them to be able to identify those numbers, obviously, before they can do the computation or anything else that we're asking them to do. And then same thing with next number fluency. It's that all verbal test where they are just saying the next number, but it drops out. So, and the just assuming that they can get those down, those are dropped out and not computed in the composite score in middle of year. And advanced quantity discrimination, so it's like the kindergarten test, but this case is not dots, it's actually numbers 0 to 100, and they give the students 2 numbers, and the number or the student has to say which number is greater. So, and they actually get to see the numbers. So they just have to point and say 75 is greater. In this missing number fluency, actually it covers, so each rectangle contains 4 numbers. But sometimes the numbers are just consecutive numbers counting by 1, but sometimes they're counting by 5s and by 10s. So you have to, and students start counting by 10s in kindergarten, but 5s is something that they really cover in 1st grade. So this number should definitely go up in the second, in the middle of the year.
Hey, how high does the number go in the number identification fluency? Do you remember in kindergarten, 1st grade?
It goes up to 99, up
Okay.
to right before 100.
Okay.
So only 1 to 2 digit numbers. Okay, so then for 2nd grade, 2nd grade is just 2 measures. All of it is whole group, and it was tough for a lot of teachers to adjust to this because at the beginning of the year, some proctors just came in, didn't throw, but obviously set some tests down on their desk and just said, take this. So a lot of the teachers were concerned that it was their students' first time seeing that format. But it is basically, it even says in the directions that you have a math worksheet in front of you, do the best you can. The computation one is just straight adding and subtracting. There's, I forget the amount of problems, but about 20 problems. And then concepts and applications is the one that some teachers were concerned with, that it was more of a reading test versus a math test. So it's more word problem based, having them read a clock, and applying some of the knowledge that they should have at that grade level. And there's no protocol that anybody, you can't read the test to a student or anything like that. So I think that's where a lot of teacher concerns came from for that.
You're saying that there's no accommodations that are allowed for somebody to read the text too.
Correct. As far, and that's been brought up in a lot of our meetings, and it's just not part of, I don't know if there's a plan to try to get accommodations allowed, or I don't know why.
I would assume that there would be. And one thing that I'll just point out to Adam and Rick again, that this is the first time that this test has been implemented. And
yeah,
anytime you implement something the first time, there's going to be a couple of kinks. There's going to be some kinks. So,
well,
when
I saw Acadience, like I had noted Acadience down, and I was like, oh, whoops, I said Acadience math. That's a reading thing. So in the agenda items, I got rid of Acadience. So yeah, like I thought I had made a mistake reading Acadience math. So yeah, that totally makes sense that it's new and there's some challenges there. It sounds like maybe we can just get rid of the Acadience reading test and use this for both. If there's that reading element, that's a challenge.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Okay. And then so for 3rd grade, same measures, computation, concepts and applications, and really the same format, just a pretty standard gridded paper with some problems on it for computation, concepts and applications, a lot of word problems, a lot of looking at a ruler, measuring, those kinds of things. So, and then this is the last bit of data for Acadience. So it just gives the for the school. Those measures aren't adding up. I wonder if I don't know. Anyways, this was on the Acadience website, so I should have looked at the numbers. I'm not, those don't really add up to the amount of students that took the test, but okay. So then as a result of the data, all the teachers have been given the data. They all have access. All of the data is housed in the progress monitoring site of Acadience. So they have all been given the data. They've been given passwords to access the data and all the graphs. All the classes have been working in small groups based off of the data, and there's also, so this is what I think a lot they went to using Acadience, is there's progress monitoring materials that align directly with the measures that are in the Acadience benchmarks. And they're like, the progress monitoring materials are endless, and you can really take a student back to their lowest level and really give them anything from Acadience to bring them up to grade level. And then we've also set some individual student goals in individual conferences based off of their scores and what they want to achieve.
What's an individual conference?
So just instead of like setting a class goal, conversing with a student and saying, this is what your score was, let's, what do you think about bumping up 10% or having them set a goal?
We're hoping that the more personalized learning and instruction that occurs, that the higher the frequency of individual conferences are occurring between a teacher and a student during the day, when they're actually talking about what they've mastered, what their data looks like, what their goals are, instead of having the teacher take up most of their time presenting all the information to everybody.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, so I'm gonna go. I have some data on the beginning of the year, the TSSP assessment. Does anybody have other questions on Acadience, or do you want to wait till the end? Or?
I've got a number of questions. What's the difference between TSSP and Acadience? That's the previously existing test?
Right. So if you, Adam, if you remember, so the Math Acadience is new. It's a formative assessment. It is not a summative assessment, and it's not meant to be evaluative, but it's meant to guide teachers to help their instruction.
Okay.
This is the first year that we've had Math Acadience be in place. Our school put in place our own version of basically this same type of formative math assessment prior to knowing that Math Acadience was going to be implemented. And this is our second year, doing it at King, where the teachers are in control of the creation of the math assessment. It's a formative math assessment that they use, and they chose a priority standard that they were going to work towards having all of our students be proficient in. So right now, this year, we have two separate formative math assessments that are occurring. I honestly don't know how the Math Acadience material was determined, and Kelly, if you have any information, you can weigh in on what we're measuring and why we're measuring these things in our primary grade students. But with the help of our former instructional coach, teachers work together to identify an essential skill, is what we call them at our school, to choose a math priority standard that they felt like was so important that we needed all of our kids to be proficient in it before they completed the school year. So that's kind of how we ended up where we're at.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask some kind of rapid fire questions. I noticed there were a lot of zeros. Are there really kids who are scoring 0 on some of these tests? Or is that kids not taking the test? See how the score range there is like 0 to 86?
Yeah, they would not put a 0 in if the student didn't take it. So there are some that did score 0. Some weren't used to the format. Some, it was the very beginning of the year, and the teachers hadn't been trained on this, so it was basically strangers coming in and giving the test to students. So it was kind of
we had a few students who were choosing not to talk at the beginning of the year, and so we couldn't collect the data. So yeah, that would be a 0.
Okay,
Also.
that makes sense. Yeah, it was just something that stood out as, oh no, there are zeros in this.
Those
Mhm.
kids no longer have that problem. They're on the other end of the spectrum, so we anticipate that will go up.
Mhm.
Okay. There's no year-over-year data now because this is the first year, but is that the plan that there will be year-over-year data as we move forward?
Yes.
I remember some of the things we've looked at in years past. There was like cohort data, so you could see like their second grade test compared to now their third grade tests and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I know, there would be no reason not to.
And one thing that I'll just point out too is that, our school before, we have opted in whole school for the Acadience reading. So that even though it's only required K3, we do it K6. And this year with Math Acadience, K3 is the required portion, but we'll be looking at implementing this whole school as a whole school math formative assessment, K6 next year.
Okay. Cool. That's very helpful. That was actually my next question, K3 only. So, okay. Yeah, that's all very helpful. I could ask questions for days, but yeah, just in the interest of time, maybe let's move to the next portion.
Okay.
Unless Rick, you have anything?
No, I'm just following along. This is great. Thank you.
Okay, so Acadians state mandated.
Actually,
Oh,
sorry, I do have a
yeah.
question.
Okay.
What is there gonna, and this is probably applies to the other TSSP test. Are there, how will we be able to follow up on the action steps provided here and see if the progress is, besides I understand that we'll get the middle of your data and end of your data.
Mhm.
Is there a way like this, I don't want to sound like out of base here, but you're thinking those action steps are going to drive the test results to be higher. Is that my understanding? Is there a way we can follow up on the progress of those action steps over time to see if they're occurring as well? Besides just the test score.
We can collect, so that specific data that we can collect. So
Mhm.
like evidence, so just really quickly, Rick, data dives done by teachers and PLCs. So teacher agendas where they talk about the data. So that would be evidence that we could provide that we're accomplishing that action step. Small groups based on data. We could ask teachers to provide us their weekly block schedule of when they're conducting small group so we know how frequently it's occurring when they're trying to address the specific math learning objectives. So we can provide evidence on these action steps.
Yeah, I was just saying like in aggregate, like
Quantitatively.
Maybe. I mean, for real, like it sounds stupid, but like this is like how you're thinking this is going to solve the below average scoring. So
right, we understand that weighing the pig doesn't fatten the pig. So, and we understand that when we're taking these measurements, we're weighing the pig, but it's the action steps that are going to fatten the pig. So, we are working towards accomplishing these things.
Yeah.
If you want to measure it quantitatively, then, we could get, instead of providing evidence or go ahead.
Maybe you're right in the sense like qualitatively fine for this, but like I think on our side we have the burden of like the accountability here to make sure that it's happening too, right? So
right. And so what Leslie and I, and that's part of our job, is to make sure that these action steps are occurring. And so I don't measure these quantitatively. I think what we do is we take snapshots of when we're participating in these things. The teachers provide us evidence, or artifacts is basically, what I would call it, where they provide evidence that they're doing these things. I think that if we wanted to take a really close look, at things, that we could try to come up with a way to measure those things.
Because yeah, you're right. I felt these things would work, but like, how do you know that one of these isn't working? Right.
So if a student is getting the progress monitoring materials, each student, if they're doing progress monitoring, it's because they are either red or yellow, so below benchmark or well below. And each student, when they're given those, it comes, so the teacher has to graph their progress. So if they're not making progress, then they would go down another grade level and start progress monitoring there until they moved up and showed proficient in that before they moved up.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps, but I will
Yeah,
say, so it is being used in all grades for very specific students. So some of those ones that are red across the board in each measure, but they haven't officially rolled the progress monitoring out for everybody. This was just something that I had access to. So we kind of, some teachers identified their biggest concerns, and we've been using that for those students. And in each grade level, there are some students that have been identified, but it's not being used for every single red or yellow student.
Nope, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is just the school-wide goal for the TSSP assessment that was kind of teacher math coach created. But 70% of students will demonstrate proficiency in their grade level on the determined desk priority standard. We gave it in October. The window is now open for the middle of year, so we should have some data hopefully before winter break. And then we'll give it again at the end of third quarter. And then the optional one in May, and I'm not sure how the option is determined, if they use that option or not. And then the proficiency is 85% on this assessment. So then this is the kindergarten, the beginning of the year assessment. So they had a lot of students in yellow, obviously. But they were pretty happy with that, especially like Leslie said, there were a lot of kindergartners that came in and weren't really talking and adjusting to school well. So they made some progress and are hoping that middle of year shows some of that progress. But for kindergarten, they have specifically looked at this data. They've used small group instruction based off of the data and are really targeting those essential skills that were determined, and that kind of led to the creation of this. They're also, kindergarten is participating in Investigations Power School. It's a little, I don't know, something that Davis kind of set up so that they could really dive deep into the curriculum and know how to best support the math instruction for those kindergarten students. So any questions about kindergarten? All right, so first grade, yeah, so a little bit of red, but they've also, and so all of these were created by teachers, so I don't know if
cherry.
What?
I said it's almost a cherry.
Yeah,
it's almost a Christmas ornament. We could almost hang it on Leslie's tree behind her there. Very nice.
Yeah, so same thing. They honestly, they did the same things, the Investigations Power School, which has really helped some of the tier 1 instruction in those classrooms. And they're doing some small groups as well. I kind of helped them create some of those groups for the instructional aides that come in every day. But they also looked at their TSSP and kind of created some other assignments that aligned with the assessment, because what they were seeing was some of the assessment items were a little bit more challenging than what they had originally thought. So they kind of have created some assignments for those small groups. So they're hoping to see some growth as well. All right, so second grade, they also have looked at this. They also are using small group, and they utilize their instructional aids. Oh, there we go. They utilize their instructional aids very well in there. And then They have been looking at and using adaptive software to differentiate instruction a lot in second grade, so that when they're working with in small groups or with the instructional aides, some of the other students, especially, they do have, I think 2 students up here that were already proficient. So they're using some of that adaptive software to push those other students that need to be pushed while they're working in small group with the other kids.
I was just going to ask, is there computer adaptive software iReady that they're using?
Second grade, no, they did not opt for iReady. They started with MyPath. They have been experimenting with other forms. They tried ST Math, they tried and Edgenuity. So actually that's kind of one of the things we've been talking about the past few days as to which one they want to go with and utilize for each class, though, wants something different. So it's been tough. So boss man, you're gonna have to make that decision.
Okay, and I would probably just say that when we use computer adaptive software to try to target a specific math learning objective, it's been my experience that computer adaptive software that allows you to assign specific things to target is more effective than a shotgun blast. Especially when we have a TSSP assessment that is very specific in what it's measuring. And so I would just say, hopefully, as we're working with our second grade team, that they are if they're using computer adaptive software as an action step to help their kids make growth, that they're being very prescriptive with, what lessons and things the computer adaptive software can provide that will target this particular learning objective.
Yeah, and the ones that I have knowledge of and have showed them, you can assign them in specific. And that's the thing, though, is that you can't monitor the teachers and what they're doing, but it's like you can assign that and look at what students are mastering those objectives, and then you can assign those kids something else and work with them. But it's, just kind of teaching them how to use the software and how to utilize it to improve student scores.
Right. So I feel like that's our job that we'll be moving forward. That's what we'll be focusing on.
Yes.
And
okay.
Especially now they've had some experience with it, we can say, okay, what's your choice? And we're all going.
Yeah.
That way.
Okay. So third grade, they have a lot of green, and looking at their assessment, a lot of it is multiplication and division, which is obviously a major work in third grade. So these green kiddos were those kids that when I looked at the multiplication part, they knew all of those facts and got those mastered in that first quarter, because that's what they started their instruction with. And then the division was the ones that just kind of pushed everybody back a little bit. But also they've looked at their data. They're doing small group instruction, and then they are using Dreambox adaptive software. And I did show them today how they can assign specific assignments. Dreambox has been a little bit difficult to figure out teacher-wise. So I was able to show them you can assign them very targeted lessons on Dreambox so that they can help those students.
It took a little while for the district or the state to get the program up and ready so that it was accessible by the schools, and that was discouraging. So it's been a little clunky, but now we're in the flow.
Yeah, I mean,
so that was more contributed to, I think, the relationship that Dreambox had with the state. They held off on purpose, but anyway, but it sounds like we're moving through those kinks.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here's fourth grade. So fourth grade, we have some work to do, but looking at their test, a lot of it is just some of the more advanced concepts that they're going to get to throughout the year versus first quarter, they have to do a lot of work leading up to those standards. So I think in looking at the test and knowing what they're doing in class, we will see some major growth when it comes to middle of year.
Are the questions the same subject matter throughout the year? So it doesn't get more difficult. It's okay. So they're basically taking tests on stuff they haven't learned yet.
Yes, and for this one, especially looking just because starting fourth grade, you have to kind of build up to the harder, more difficult standards that fourth grade covers. So,
Right.
And like I said, I really think that they've covered some of the other things that are included on there. So I think they'll show some growth.
I have a quick, what's limited proficiency versus proficient?
So kind of just relating back to, well, actually, Dan, do you want to answer this since it was created last year? I don't know if you guys defined it differently than what I would.
Yeah, limited proficiency. So as far as the rating, 85% and above is proficient. 60 to 85% is limited, or otherwise known as approaching proficiency, and or known as below proficient. And then the red is the not proficient, and not proficient is 60% or below. So that's what we mean by limited.
Thanks.
Okay, and then so for fourth grade, obviously we have some work to do, but they've looked at the data. They all do a small group as well. We have one teacher in fourth grade that's really taken off on the PCBL piece of learning, which is really he's set up a computer program of his own, or it's on Canvas, where the kids are kind of working at their own pace, and they don't really move on until they show that they have mastered the content in one area before they move on to the next.
Kelly, and if I can interrupt, and I apologize, I was just going to say that it might be interesting for us to be able to look at fourth grade separated out by classroom to see how the PCBL is impacting the kids and the proficiency on the TSSP assessment.
Yeah, for middle of year, like when.
Yeah, for our next data point. Yeah, I personally would like to, but I'm sure that our community council members would also be interested in. So we would love to look at fourth grade as a whole, but we'd also like to look at it separated by classroom. Yeah,
and I was actually looking at his data yesterday, and he was, just looking at how they're progressing in his program. So I think I'm excited to see the data as well. But then, so daily routines modeled. So I've been in each of their classrooms doing some number talks, which one doesn't belong, and some estimation 180, just really trying to work on students' number sense and ability to just kind of work with numbers and manipulate them to make them a little bit more workable for them. When fourth grade and moving on to fifth and sixth grade, they really have to take bigger numbers and do the same thing they were doing in third grade, but with up to 5-digit numbers. So we really think that these routines will help them be able to kind of work with numbers and manipulate them in the way that's easiest for them. And then fourth grade does use iReady, and each of the teachers do know how to assign individual assignments to students, but they also know how to assign very specific standards to students. So that's it. Okay, moving on to fifth grade. So a lot of red, once again, they just, a lot of computation in fifth grade with just the long division, which looking at their tests, that was what kind of held them back. So they also looked at data. They have done small group instruction. We have a teacher there also kind of making her own competency-based learning personalized so that the students can work at their own pace and not move on until they master one thing. I've also been in their classrooms modeling some number talks and some just different math language, and they also use iReady. to differentiate instruction. And last but not least,
so this might go without saying, but maybe we can do the same thing with 5th grade, with 4th grade, so we can do the same comparison.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if Dan feels similar there, but
I would be fine. I don't know how long the classroom's been. I know that our 4th grade classroom has been doing it for quite a while. I would be interested to know how long the 5th grade classroom has been implementing a more and basically we're talking about implementing a more asynchronous instructional approach for kids that's mastery based. And so, yeah, I would be interested. I know that our 5th grade teacher has talked to our 4th grade teacher, and that's what got our 5th grade teacher interested in implementing a similar type of instructional approach in her classroom. But I think it would be interesting also to look at how long the intervention of the instructional approach has been in place.
Yeah, and I will tell you, so she started the full week before Thanksgiving, so that full week, and then the 2 days of Thanksgiving week, and then she's been doing it this week. So she has just kind of gotten started on that.
And that's one of the great things we do in PLCs is we're able to compare what one teacher does to another and say, look what's working here. And because we're meeting with them, we can guide them through that process.
And that's also the power of formative data. If we're not taking measurements along the way, it really puts us at a disadvantage. We need more data that's formative that can guide us along the way, so that we can make these adjustments during the school year to try to improve our instructional approach.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then 6th grade, similar results. I mean, I feel like it's just very similar. But same thing, Data Dive, they are doing small group instruction. We went through and actually looked at their data and made some groups based off of which kids mastered which standards on the TSSP assessment. I've also been in their rooms modeling the number talks and the which one doesn't belong. And then they have been doing the PCBLP since the beginning of the year. I will say one teacher sticks to it with fidelity more than the others. So that will also be interesting data to see and see if it's, I don't know how it's working in those classrooms as well. Okay, and so then with all of these action steps, I just thought this was important as we are in and out of classrooms to look at Hattie's effect sizes on some of the things that we talk about. So when the teachers are estimating and doing the PLC piece and looking at the data, that's one of the, the things that they can do most to affect students' achievement. We're also working on self-reported grades where the teachers are conferencing with students. They're making graphs in class of showing their growth. Response to intervention. The micro teaching I thought was interesting. That's when a teacher kind of records themselves and learns from their mistakes by rewatching the video. Classroom discussion is all that, the kind of number talks that I've done, the interventions that they've done. And we're really working on teacher clarity. Anytime I go into a room and, I see that there's not learning objectives posted or that students can't tell me exactly what the goal is of their lesson for the day, that's an important conversation to have with the teacher. And then feedback from teachers to students as being immediate and direct and very intentional. So I don't know, all of these things just show how much doing this certain item over here will really affect student achievement. All right, I'm done, I think.
Yeah,
Any
that was
questions?
very informative.
Strong work, Kelly.
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Yeah, and it really shows there is room for improvement. And as you talk through your involvement in the classroom, I'm excited to see what you're able to, help move forward with in the school as far as math education. So yeah, I don't know if maybe we could have you come back, February or March, and kind of give us an update on progress. I think that would be helpful. Is our last community council meeting in April? So maybe we could target like March.
I think we have one in May. I think our January community council might be a quick turnaround for Kelly to
Right.
look at the data, see what we're looking at. So I think maybe a realistic opportunity for Kelly to come back and rejoin us, although we would love to have her at every community council. That February might be a more realistic one. We do have a community council plan for May. I think that would be a great way to have Kelly put together a cumulative or a longitudinal data analysis over the entire year. Because part of this is as different grade levels are, progressing and having different numbers of kids improve in their proficiency. That's where we would love to have Kelly and school administration have conversations with them to identify those effective instructional practices that are occurring that is stimulating the growth. So.
Okay, sounds good. Really appreciate you going over that. Just in the interest of time, I think we'll move the other agenda items to the January. So just initially, the items we'll cover in January will be the house programs and the effect that's having on the school. The introduction to common sense education, which is a potential school-wide digital citizenship program that I believe would be looking at using community council funds for.
It's actually a free program.
Oh, it's free.
Yep. I would highly, I came prepared to discuss it. We are out of time. I would highly encourage you. So commonsensemedia.org. It has a whole curriculum for educators, and really in talking with our computer science teacher and our schools SDS, I just think that and contemplating also our plan that we have in place to promote positive digital citizenship for our kids, I think that it could use a boost. Okay. And I think that looking at obviously a free curriculum that we don't need to pay for, but that's also robust and that can fill in some of the gaps that might currently exist in the educational program that we're providing our kids, I think could be beneficial. I use Common Sense Media personally with my own children, and so that's why I'm familiar with it. But I know that our computer science teacher is excited about it. She also feels like she feels that there's the similar need of improving the digital citizenship instruction that we're providing our kids. So I would highly encourage you guys to look at it, look over the curriculum, look over what it has to offer. If you want to continue to look at research on other digital citizenship plans or curriculum, excuse me, I would encourage you to do that. But we would like to move forward in shoring up some of the instruction that surrounds that at our school.
Okay, makes sense. So yeah, we can watch some of those videos ahead of time, familiarize ourselves, and talk through that in January, and then we can review the concepts on the personalized learning framework. Okay, with that said, given the time, I would motion that we close. Anyone second it? All right. Like Leslie second.
Leslie's thumbs up is a second.
That's an official sign. We will take it. All right, great. Yeah, Rick, if you'll post the meeting minutes when you've got them, and then
thanks for getting all that ready, Kelly. That was really helpful because we're new to the Acadience test too, and it helped us understand it better too. We appreciate that.
Yep. I liked all your colors on the graphs. They were great.
Thank you very much. Adam told me it was a bunch of males and you wouldn't like my graphics. So
I actually loved you. I loved your graphics.
I thought it was great.
Thanks.
I thought they were wonderful. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop recording, but thank you everybody for coming.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks all.
Okay. We'll see you.
Have a good evening.